Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you to the witnesses. I tell you what I'm fighting against on behalf of the American people. I'm fighting against a clean debt ceiling with no spending cuts. I'm fighting against tax increases on hardworking families. We need to put this in context. Reckless spending got us into this mess, particularly in the last several years under the Biden administration. That's why House Republicans have been fighting on behalf of the American people to reduce spending. The first step in getting spending cuts was passing the Limit, Save, Grow Act. Passing that bill finally brought the president to the negotiating table after he ignored the issue for months. Since the beginning of the 118th Congress, House Republicans have made it clear that the United States cannot and will not default on its debts, but that an increase in the debt ceiling must be paired with fiscal reforms to reduce the deficit. I'm not completely satisfied with the product that we have before us, but the negotiated package does change the trajectory of spending and puts us on a better path. It's better than defaulting, and it's certainly better than a blank check to Democrats. Chairman Smith, how many days did it take for the president to come to the table to even start negotiating a solution?
Well, for one, the president, after meeting with the speaker, the next day he was at the prayer breakfast saying that he was going to negotiate with the speaker, but he waited 100 days.
That's right, almost 100 days. That's almost 100 days we could have been solving this looming problem for the American people. Chairman Smith, what do the majority of Americans want to see accompany an increase in the debt limit?
The majority of Americans want to address the reckless spending. They want cuts in spending, and in fact, this does cuts in spending.
60% of Americans say that we should only raise the debt ceiling if spending cuts happen simultaneously, and that's what we're fighting for. Does this bill reduce spending?
Yes.
Does this bill save taxpayers money?
Yes.
Does this bill reduce funding for the president's plan to expand the IRS?
Yes.
Does this bill ensure that able-bodied adults who receive money from welfare programs must meet work requirements?
Yes.
Does this bill require that student loan payments restart?
Yes.
Does this bill rescind excessive COVID spending?
It sure does.
Does this bill prevent the U.S. from defaulting on our debt?
Yes.
Does this bill increase taxes?
No.
Does this bill create new government programs?
No.
Chairman Smith, has Congress ever passed a bill that raises the debt ceiling while creating requirements that reduce both current and future spending?
Has Congress ever
that
increased the debt limit?
That raises the debt ceiling while creating spending reductions?
Yes, we have.
What's the consequence of defaulting on our debt?
It's never happened. So the consequences could be catastrophic.
What is the alternative? We've heard a lot that, today that the Fiscal Responsibility Act isn't the answer. What alternative are we looking at if we don't move forward with this negotiated agreement?
A blank check debt limit increase.
Thank you. Before I close, I just want to note we would likely have not been able to secure the conservative items in the Fiscal Responsibility Act as standalone bills. We did pass a bill to reduce funding for the IRS. Chairman Smith, where is that bill now?
It's waiting for action in the Senate.
Let's see here. We did rescind COVID funding. Where is that now?
It's waiting for action in the Senate.
Right. Do you think we could have gotten administrative pay-go as a standalone bill?
I believe so.
We could have passed administrative pay-go as a standalone bill?
Out of the House?
Yes. I mean, into law.
Into law? I don't think that the Senate would ever have taken it up.
So none of these bills. We've got reducing funding for the IRS. That could pass the House. It can't pass the Senate. It won't get signed by the president. Work requirements for TANF and SNAP. Student loan repayments. We've heard from some folks saying that, well, this doesn't address the student loan bailout. Did we do a bill that rescinded funds for the student loan bailout?
Yes.
What happened to that?
It's waiting for action in the Senate.
And who controls the Senate?
The Democrats.
Who controls the White House?
The Democrats.
So could we have gotten permitting reform through the Senate and to the president?
I think if you talk to Senator Manchin, he was promised permitting reform, but apparently, even though he's a Democrat, they're not following through on their obligations in permitting reform.
And in fact, we passed H.R. 1 and H.R. 2. One was a Border Security Act. One was an Energy Act. Where are those bills now?
They're still trying to get their members to have any kind of action.
Okay. Do you think that the Senate would pass budget caps for 6 years?
Absolutely not.
So all of these things that we got in the Fiscal Responsibility Act are major accomplishments in my view. Let's be clear, as Mr. Massey correctly noted, this debt ceiling bill says to the American people and the rest of the world that we will pay our debts, but we will do so only by putting us on a better fiscal path. This isn't a bill that authorizes new spending. The money has already been spent. We are cutting the spending trajectory and adding some components like work requirements, like permitting reform for economic growth. The appropriations bills in October is where the future spending or cutting in spending will occur. This bill will force an open process with no omnibus bills at the last second, and it will force spending cuts. This bill isn't perfect, but the Fiscal Responsibility Act achieves the important principles included in Limit, Save, Grow and fulfills one of House Republicans' key commitments to the American people in tying a reduction in spending to any debt limit increase. You want to know what's remarkable about that? Republicans don't control the White House. They don't control the Senate. We only control 1/2 of 1/3 of government. We are certainly punching above our weight. For the first time ever, an increase in the debt ceiling is coupled with a reduction in spending year over year. In fact, this new bill will cut spending by $2.1 trillion if the proposed budget caps are left in place for all 6 years, according to the preliminary estimates from the CBO. I came here to fight. And I'm fighting against a clean debt ceiling increase, which is undoubtedly what we will be faced with if we do not support this bill. There's no better deal to be had. The alternative here is a clean debt increase where Democrats can keep on spending unimpeded right off a cliff. And in a clean debt ceiling, we will not only lose what we gained in Limit, Save, Grow, but we'll also lose the historic cuts and savings that we achieved in the Fiscal Responsibility Act. The Democrats wanted a clean debt ceiling. They wanted a tax and spend budget. We've successfully fought back against that in this bill and cut spending. There's a saying in court, if both sides are unhappy with the result, it's probably a balanced agreement. We should take these wins while they're on the table before the left takes them away. That's what House Republicans have delivered for the American people. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I yield back.